Well, hello everyone and welcome. In first place, I would like to thank on behalf of GPS and all its members, ICC for organizing these events online and their leadership in relation with climate change. I would like to thank ICC UK, Chris Southworth and Rogerio Guesti for all their support in these activities, and also to thank ICC Argentina for their constant support and leadership in many of the topics. We have also been supported by the BACC, the British Argentine Chamber of Commerce in London, and the British Chamber of Commerce in Argentina in order to organize this event today, which is titled Sustainable Farming Practices and Climate Change, a Vision from the Southern Cone. So in order to set the screen, Paloma, can you go back 2 slides, please? Thank you. GPS is a network of organizations that was established in 2012 of private entities from Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina related to food security that wishes to contribute to the integration of the Southern Cone countries and to the international projection. So it's formed of members that are institutions, experts, and entrepreneurs. And the main objective of GPS is to prepare documents and to make them known around the world so that these activities and the importance of these 4 countries, which are the main contributors to global food security as net exporters, is known and understood, and these countries are supported as developing countries in this area. So GPS works as a network of institutions and people from these 4 countries, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, in geopolitics of food, regional integration, agribusiness, international development, trade, finance, and investment, and of course, what brings us here today within the framework of COP26, climate change, and ag sustainability. So in today's seminar, what we would like to discuss, I think Paloma, for some reason, left, and we no longer have my presentation. So if you don't mind, Paloma's coming back. Paloma, would you like to share your screen again, or would you like me to do so? Right. So in today's presentation, we have 3 extraordinary speakers from Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. And we would like to, before presenting them, what we would like to discuss today is how farmers and ag value chains in the region and also globally happen to be committed, deeply committed with sustainability and with being a solution to climate change. And this presents, of course, an opportunity both for them or for us and for humanity, but also a huge set of challenges, which we would also like today to highlight. So Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina are the most important next exporting countries. And they also have a very proven track record of innovation that has increased ag production in a very relevant way, mainly during the last 30 years. These production has been based on sustainable production practices and technologies. And this has had the effect of keeping, and at the same time, greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture have remained constant. And therefore, what has happened over these last 30 years is that greenhouse gas emission per ton of product or per unit of product has decreased sharply. And this is the opposite to what has happened to other regions or other countries that have been heavily subsidizing their agriculture, something that does not happen in this region, either. And also we would like to address how climate finance and agricultural global trade should facilitate both food security and natural resource sustainability through nature-based solutions. And Eduardo will be explaining the opportunity and the extraordinary opportunity that arises from global carbon markets in the region. So our speakers today, next slide, please, Paloma. So I'm joined today with Lucía Pittaluga, who's an economist, an important economist from Uruguay, and has a master's degree from La Sorbonne, from Picardie University in economics. She's a joint professor at the Institute of Economics and the Faculty of Science and Administration at the University of the Republic. But she's very well known in the region and globally as a Uruguayan leader of the new topic of the bioeconomy. We also have Sabine Papendieck from Argentina. She is a political science graduate and has a master in international economic relations. She is the general coordinator of the Argentine Carbon Neutral Program, and she's also a managing partner at Estrateco. She is an international consultant, researcher, and author specializing in market access for agro-industrial products, international trade, negotiation, sustainability, and formulation of public-private policies and strategies, and advises both the business sector or the expert business industry and governments and international organizations. And she's also been teaching for over 15 years on an undergraduate and graduate level. Eduardo Brito is also with us, and he's an ag engineer and also an MBA and Bayer Crop Sciences Sustainability Director for Latin America. He's also the director of ABAGI, which is the Brazilian Agribusiness Association, the chairman of Sustainability Committee of ABAGI, and a council member of Coalizão Brasileira Brasil Florestas, Clima Agricultura, and Fiespe's Agribusiness Council. He's well known as an agribusiness leader globally, always focused on strategic sustainability and government relations. And he's also a member of the board of the LACC and is president of GTPS. Well, myself, I'm a founding member of GPS, this network that gathers us today. I'm also a director and member of Carbon Group Agroclimatic Solutions. I'm a professor, good graduate level professor of circular value chains, bioenergy, sustainability, with a special focus on nature-based solutions, which is the key part of our work at Carbon Group. I'm also a consulting member of the Argentine Council for International Relations, member of ICC Argentina Climate and Energy Commission, and of ICC's Global Working Group on Carbon Pricing Mechanism. So in order to start and to set the frame of the discussions we would like to share with you today, we think that it's important when we think of agriculture and the productive ecosystems and natural ecosystems to understand how these greenhouse gas emissions are different from emissions from other sectors or other industries, mainly from burning fossil fuels. The first difference is that emissions in agriculture are not inherent. They're not part of the production process. If we were in a bus and the bus would go on the road, it would emit greenhouse gas emissions. If it stopped, the engine is stalled, then emissions stop. But in agriculture, producing more beef, more milk, or more crops does not necessarily mean that emissions will increase. Therefore, it is hard for farmers and for agronomists to know what practices and what activities generate emissions and which mitigate or sequester carbon in their ecosystems. Then we also would like to enhance and to highlight that all ag activities in the end start with CO2 being sequestered from the atmosphere, because that's a cycle of life. If there was no CO2 in the atmosphere and there was no photosynthesis, then we wouldn't be here, because there would be no free oxygen and there would be no biomass for us to feed on our trophic chains. And finally, in order to set the scene, and we'll be discussing the bioeconomy, and we'll be discussing carbon markets and nature-based solutions. Unfortunately, the world of agriculture since the 1930s, more or less, has been led by ag subsidies, trade barriers, and trade wars. And these are not helping farmers on either side of this fence. Those that receive subsidies or suffer them, they're not being supported into designing and implementing or funding improved practices to mitigate climate change. And this can be seen in the latest report by the European Court of Auditors in relation with the Common Agricultural Policy and their subsidies for climate change. Next, please. So when we think about greenhouse gas emission sources, factors, and how to measure them and report them, the story is, well, not very long, but it has over 30 years. And it started in 1990 with the first national greenhouse gas inventories being published with the methodologies that were known back then and designed from technologies or knowledge from the 80s or the 70s by the world's best scientists. These methodologies were in 1996 published as the 1996 guidelines for national inventories, which became the standard for all countries. What we learned later, and we realized, and that's the reason why I got involved into climate change in 2009, right? So from 1990 to 2009, 20 years had passed, is that those methodologies were overestimating greenhouse gas emissions in many of the emission sources and many emission factors in agriculture. 21 in Paris, the Argentine government calculated both the 1996 methodology and the 2006 methodology to find, and that's what one thing that a group of people were insisting in our country, what we found is that the 1996 methodology overestimated emissions of the whole sector by 100%. And in the case of corn, I was executive director of the Argentine Corn and Sorghum Value Chain Association, which is not a statistical error. Then again, in 2006, in 2019, the new guidelines are published. And again, one of the second most important emission source for grazing cattle, which is nitrous oxide emissions from dejections, is reduced by 80%. So unfortunately, in this sector in agriculture and the inventories and carbon footprints of different sectors, what we find is that opposite to what has happened to other greenhouse gas emissions from coal, natural gas, and oil and other industrial activities, ag inventories and footprints have shown an overestimation of emission sources and factors for more than 30 years. But not only these are relevant, let's discuss for a second what happens with the conversion factors. Next slide, please. So what we can see in this slide is the conversion metric that is used in the Uruguayan latest inventory. What we see on the left side is the use of the GWP methodology, and on the right, the GTP methodology. I don't want to go into much detail, but if you go in one of these columns to the bottom line, what you see on the right is 11,809 CO2 emissions from Uruguay, gigagram emissions in CO2 equivalent. And if you go to the right, it says minus 2,772 gigagrams of CO2. So the same country with the same cattle, right? The same herds, the same grasslands, and the same trees and other industries, depending on the methodology, is a relevant emitter or a country that is sequestering carbon with negative emissions. And unfortunately, this has to do with the methodology. Countries are mandated to use the GWP 100 methodology, but many scientists are saying that actually, and we think that countries that start to analyze their inventories this way start to have this doubt of which is the science that reflects best our real emissions and their contribution to climate change. Next slide, please. But again, 2 years ago, more or less, a very important professor that has been for decades with the IPCC, Professor Miles Allen of Oxford University, actually designed a new method or a new metric for converting methane to CO2, specifically designed to reflect the best way possible biogenic methane, which is the biogenic gases that originate from agriculture and ecosystems, cultivated or productive ecosystems and natural ecosystems. And he says that the new metric should be called GWP 100 star, and stop using GWP 100 because it overestimates the emissions from sectors like the beef industry or dairy industry that have been very stable in their headcounts, and with time they have been increasing their feed efficiency and other efficiency factors. So if this was Hollywood, probably it would, if it was a film, it would have been probably called like a series of unfortunate events, right? What has happened during the last 30 years with agriculture and the difficulties that we have. However, this does not mean that our countries and our farmers and our ag value chains do not want to take a commitment and want to mitigate their emissions and sequester soil carbon. Next slide, please. So what we see here, and this is an ICC hosted event and hospitality of ICC UK and our friends there, and ICC Paris is great. And this is, I think, their best flagship. I think this is ICC's best flagship. And we can see here on the slope that sectors like energy, industry, etc., must go to zero emissions by 2050. And at the bottom, we see a yellow line and a light green that turns into dark green. We think we are there, and we should be, and we want to be part of that solution that is transforming emissions in our systems of nitrous oxide, methane, and CO2 into long-term carbon being sequestered and emissions being mitigated. So with this in mind, I would like to ask Lucia if she can present how Uruguay has been dealing and designing activities under her leadership in relations with the bioeconomy. So Lucia, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting panel. Okay, next slide, please. So I would like to present Uruguay with this painting of Joaquín Torres Garcia. He's a very renowned artist, Uruguayan artist, and he puts the continent upside down to be seen. And that is the problem of Uruguay, is that it is a very small country, and it is not seen in the north. No, so by this map, you can put Uruguay more in the north and you can see it. Uruguay also has very good rankings of indexes, international indexes. As you can see in the left, there's, in the context of Latin America, Uruguay has a very high democracy index, corruption perception index, and prosperity and the rule of law, very important. The rule of law index is the first in the context of Latin America. So by watching these indexes, you can see that Uruguay is a very small, very far, and very reliable country. Next slide, please. At the same time, Uruguay has implemented a growth path with the regards puts in an important place the distribution of the income. As you can see also in the context of Latin America, Uruguay has a per capita income with a very good distribution in the context of Latin America. Go on, please. Next slide. But Uruguay has a production that is relied in the primary sector, And the Uruguay has a livestock country. It is a livestock country with an economy strongly based on the agriculture sector. 70% of all exports come from the agriculture sector. This is a benefit because there is a very important specialization in the form the country produces its livestock, and it is a disadvantage in the sense that the country, and we know perfectly, has to decide to transform its meat in more value-added products. Next slide, please. And these livestock emits, and Martín already detailed all the greenhouse emissions and all the problems that the greenhouse emissions have. So the most important greenhouse emissions of Uruguay, because it is a country specialized in livestock production, is evidently the agriculture. And the strategy to fight for against climate change in Uruguay has three targets, simultaneous targets: to produce more food, to impact less the environment footprint, and to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So next slide, please. And this strategy, this is a triple strategy. No, this triple strategy has very important issues in the circular bioeconomy. No, because the circular bioeconomy permits to implement this triple targets in a more overall strategy. As you can see in this slide, the achievement of the three targets is not restricted only to the technical or technological issues. There is more. There is the foreseeing of the ecosystems services, as you can see, the production of biomass, the regulating services, and the cultural services. So it is evident that both mitigation and adaptation must take a central part in the development strategy. But without the goal of transforming the economy, little can be sustained in the long term. But circular bioeconomy can achieve this. A circular bioeconomy, as you can see, turns renewable biological resources and waste systems into new products. That's very important for the value added that is needed in this economy to continue the growth with equity, and to slash carbon emissions. An economy as the Uruguayan, very intensive in the use of renewable natural resources, is a candidate to adopt that kind of strategy. In fact, Uruguay is now in the process to launch its circular bioeconomy strategy in this year, certainly in this year. Next slide, please. So the circular bioeconomy permits to achieve these sustainable development goals. This is an ECLAC work, as you can see, that links the objectives of the circular bioeconomy strategy to different SDGs goals. And this strategy permits to achieve simultaneously these three targets. In one hand, the environmental and climate change targets, and Uruguay has its LDCs, NDCs, the NAPs, the NMA, the NAMAs, and the climate services. These climate services are very important because they involve the production, translation, and transfer knowledge that evidence-based policies need. No, so you have to create those knowledge climate services to be able to implement policies that are based in evidence. The second very big goal is economic. And there, food security must be secured, must be achieved. And food security, if you take the FAO definition, is when people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences. So when you speak about food security, you have to have food availability, food access, utilization, and stability. Third, the social issue. So there we speak about the social ecological systems, a new paradigm that emphasizes the human societies, economies, and cultures are constructive parts of the biosphere. And social ecological systems must be implemented in this triple strategy that circular bioeconomy can achieve. So this is what Uruguay is trying to implement in this moment, that climate change policy with this overall vision, holistic vision of a strategy of circular bioeconomy to do all these things. Well, thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you, Lucia. Great presentation. We'll come back with questions back to you. Excellent. And I would like to invite Sabine to present the Argentine carbon neutral program, which is also very well aligned with what you were just mentioning, Lucia. So please, Sabine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. It is a pleasure for me to be here today to present the Programa Argentino de Carbono Neutro. Next slide, please, Paloma. The Programa Argentino de Carbono Neutro is a private voluntary adhesion program developed to promote the consolidation of a sustainable brand for Argentine products from the food, beverage, and bioenergy export sectors. It is formed by the main commerce and cereal stock exchange of Argentina. The work of these 7 bolsas jointly rendered the program effective. The program is implemented through roundtables hosted on a voluntary basis. Roundtables are formed by producers, groups and associations, companies and chambers from each of the productive value chain links, hence ensuring full national geographic representation in Argentina. The programs generate a place where naturally competitors and input suppliers set along the same productive sector work together, both methodologically and financially, to develop practical tools and manuals that enable producers and companies privately calculate and manage their carbon balance according to international accepted standards. The program coordinates the sector roundtables that are set and manage the activities associated to the call of proposals for the consultancy service that are required to local experts in order to achieve a local capacity building and knowledge of local practices. Today, under the Programa Argentino de Carbono Neutro, works an ecosystem of 35 producers and companies that produce and export food, beverage, and bioenergy in Argentina. The oil and corn and sorghum manuals have now been completed and are today available for all the productive actors of the value chain. The wheat roundtable is under development and is expected to be finished in February 2022. Next slide, Paloma, please. Each sectoral roundtables work towards the identification of main export products with actual or potential carbon balance requirements in market, yes? Identification of the functional units related to these products, selection of the international accepted methodology to analyze and calculate carbon balance, for example, GHG Protocol, ISO, PAS, etc. Methodological development of case studies to generate transparent and open calculators based on the actual agroeconomical local practices, local data and default data when locally accepted are not available, calculation manual developed to follow the definite international methodological standard in order to assess to a future possible independent certification globally accepted, and an environmental best practice manual to follow and implement action toward emission reduction, best practices aligned to UN Sustainable Development Goals and Global Reporting Initiative standards for performance